But I don't know. I need to get through. There we go. So two. It looks so much better than me just talking to one person. Okay, we're starting on chapter 5 today. It's about hormones in the brain. Hormones work in a lot of different ways. It's really kind of fascinating that they work at so many different levels. When we talk about, actually hormones act as chemical signals. They can act as chemical signals inside your own body, or they can actually act as chemical signals outside your body, so that they affect other things. It's really kind of fascinating. Pheromones are a form of hormone. Allomones are a form of hormone. Allomones are put off by different plants, and they induce other things like bees or bats or whatever or hummingbirds they draw the animal to them, and then that animal will spread their pollen to another plant. So allomones actually attract other animals, other species. As exciting as all that is. But they can act at a micro level. Neurocrine, when we talk about endocrine, when we talk about all the hormones, they function in a lot of different ways. One, they function inside the neuron, or with the neuron. The hormones will stimulate a select neuron, and they do that in the synaptic communication. This is known as neurocrine. We have endocrine, we have autocrine, we have paracrine, we have pheromones, and we have allomones. So the neurocrine is just a neuron communicating with another neuron. So it's synaptic communication. Autocrine is a hormone activating a releasing gland, and we're going to talk about that a little later on. We're going to talk about that. It's quite interesting how it works. It's specifically in the allows you to utilize glucose. There's an area in your pancreas, the islets of Langerhans, and within the islets of Langerhans, the different you've got beta cells and you've got alpha cells, and they will communicate with one another. Wow, today must be Thursday. Paracrine is hormones targeting nearby cells, and we're going to talk about that as well. Endocrine, of course, we talk about endocrine all the time, the endocrine glands. That's where a hormone it communicates through the blood, and it will go to a target gland through the blood, and then it stimulates something, it will change something. And then pheromones, of course, are communication between individuals. Then allomones, of course, are communication between species. As previously described, actually, I didn't previously, well, I just did, I guess. Neurocrine communication is synaptic communication. It's highly localized. And of course, this is how, when we're talking about when we are talking about hormones, normally they are communicating just from one neuron to the next. So they're actually neurotransmitters. Some of the neurotransmitters are also hormones. Epinephrine, norepinephrine are hormones as well as neurotransmitters. Okay, so that's neurocrine. The autocrine, in an autocrine cell, the secreted hormone is released by the cell and then finds receptors on their own cell to attach to, so that it's actually communicating with itself, as much sense as that makes. So it's trying to stimulate itself by releasing the hormone. The hormone, of course, goes to another receptor site. That receptor site, of course, fires the cell. And that's known as auto. Anything auto is self. So it's self-inducing is what it is. Self-inducing cells. The paracrine cells release a chemical communicator that affects a nearby target cell. The strongest impacts are nearby cells, and of course, this is how it works with the islets of Langerhans. The alpha cells will stimulate the beta cells will stimulate the alpha cells, getting them to release whatever they are releasing, and we're going to go over that in just a second. One is releasing glycogen and the other is releasing insulin, but they are stimulating each other to release a different chemical. If we have an imbalance, if we have a problem, then potentially what will happen is the individual will develop diabetes. There's two types of diabetes. There's ones where not enough insulin is produced, that's type 1 diabetes. And then there's type 2 diabetes, where your cells become insensitive to insulin. And in that case, of course, it's the same result, actually. You're not utilizing glucose properly, so one of the things we have to do is we have to give you a medicine, a pharmaceutical that will induce your body to function better. If you have type 1 diabetes, of course, we have to give you insulin. We have to give you exogenous insulin in order for your body to function properly. But if you have type 2 diabetes, which is very, very common, especially among natives, as odd as that seems. Aaron, hi, how you doing?
My brother.
I'm jealous of your haircut.
My what?
You're high and tight. I'm a little jealous. I need a haircut. So.
Give you a haircut?
Yeah, wander off someplace and get a haircut. So I'm jealous of your haircut. I need a haircut. Where do you get a haircut around here? Where do you get a haircut?
Cut my own hair.
You cut your own hair.
Listed, I didn't have much money. I told you.
How do you get to the back?
A lot of mirrors.
Okay. Wow, you must be skilled. Okay.
I use only one mirror. It's good.
It looks good. It looks good. It looks like it was done by a professional. So we'll pretend you're a professional or something. The endocrine communication is through the release of hormones in the bloodstream. Blood takes the hormonal signal to a distant targeted organs where the hormone changes the function of the targeted organ. And we're going to talk about a lot of different endocrine. We're going to talk about the whole endocrine system. There are a number of endocrine glands, of course, including the gonads. And we're going to discuss exactly how those function. Pheromones, a lot of people don't believe in pheromones. We know they exist in other species. Do they exist in human species? We know we put off pheromones. We know that some people can detect pheromones, but other people can't detect pheromones. There is a structure in your nose that detects pheromones. Maybe not a structure in your nose, but there is a structure in my nose that detects pheromones, as strange as that may seem. So it's about 2/3 of the population have this structure in their nose. Is it vestigial? Vestigial means that it's not functional anymore. It's just something left over from our ancient past. So the question is it vestigial? And I don't have an answer for that. There are people that argue that it's non-functional, it doesn't do anything. There are other people like me who argue that you actually react to the pheromonal stimulation. And I tell you that only because I have detected it myself consciously. Now, normally this is not a conscious thing. Detecting pheromones is not conscious, it's subconscious, it's subliminal. And it has to do with sexual attraction. So it's really a confusing and very relatively controversial topic. One of the things that we think is that Europeans, people from Europe, put off pheromones and they detect pheromones, but we're not exactly sure about other people. We know the Japanese do not put off pheromones. We know the Japanese do not detect pheromones. So what does that mean? In Japan there are no pheromones, and in the United States there are. Not in the United States, but among Europeans there is a pheromone. We don't know. We're not exactly sure. But I have the structure in my nose. I'm well aware of the structure. I have reacted to it on several different occasions, which was a bit of a surprise because, you don't really think in that direction. You're not expecting to have a reaction when you just meet somebody. Okay, so what does that mean? What that means is that select individuals are attracted to select individuals because of their odor. That's what it means, as confusing as that is. They've done studies, they did studies in Switzerland where they had men dirty their t-shirts, and then they put them in bags. And you can look at this, it's really kind of fascinating research. They put them in plastic bags so that they wouldn't lose their odor. And then they had women, looking at or smelling the bags. And normally they found the pungent odor of male, noxious as negative. But every once in a while they'd come across one that they would go, ooh, this one smells really good. I don't know. So in Switzerland, of course, women react to the smell of men, I guess, or a select man. Now the interesting thing was, so they did a immune fingerprint of the women, and they did an immune fingerprint of the men. And what they discovered was that women, in this case, were attracted to men who corrected flaws in their immune system. Now that's very logical if you think about it, because we're dealing with a population that lives with their pigs. We're dealing with a population with a lot of diseases. I mean, most of the world's diseases came out of China, and they came out of Europe. Smallpox and bubonic plague, and all these horrors, chickenpox, measles, mumps, all of these diseases came out of Europe and Asia. So these individuals, in order for the species to survive, they needed to have the strongest immune system they possibly could. So all of this is logical. Now we do know that when Europeans first came over here, we just about devastated the entire population of the Americas with our diseases, right? That's fairly well known. Some people estimate that 99% of the natives of the Americas were killed by diseases, smallpox, measles, mumps, especially smallpox. Smallpox is really serious. Anyway, okay, so if this were true, if the whole pheromone and immune system fingerprint is correct, then there is a logic to it, and there is a positive inheritance that can take place because of the pheromones. So the question is, do they exist? And the answer is we don't know for sure. And maybe some populations respond to it and some populations don't. So there you go. We do know that 1/3 of the population does not smell body odor, which is a little confusing. So if you get in the elevator with somebody and they smell badly to you, then you're not one of those 1/3 of the population. You're one of the 2/3 of the population that responds to body odor. Okay, so that's pheromones. We know other animals put off pheromones